2nd, 2026. And yeah, I'm having breakfast. Yeah, so I have the cheesy powdered flaxseed powder already put in here. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm looking at this little rule thing. I'm just gonna share it with Gemini to see what Gemini has to say about it. Okay, so let's get some crunchy peanut butter here. Yeah. It's hard to get this looking straight. Maybe my face is not straight. Okay, yeah, let's get this going. So, matcha green tea here. Full movie. If Star Wars had a $10 budget.
Folks, there's something called plug-in solar power. Now, if what comes to mind is you've got a cord attached to a couple solar panels, you plug that into a receptacle in your house.
Hey, Chelsea Grenier, how you doing?
Folks, that's a real thing. We're going to dive right into it coming up next. You know, a couple days ago, somebody left a comment asking Leah, what do you think about plug-in solar? I thought, you know what, that's a really good question because a lot of homeowners, they have never even heard of plug-in solar power.
I never heard of plug-in solar power.
It's not a new thing, folks. It's been around. In fact, it's a big thing in Europe. And in Germany, there are over 1 million households that have plug-in solar power. So maybe you're thinking, well, what about here in this country, right? We live here in the U.S., Leah. Can I get plug-in solar power systems here? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. In fact, I went on Amazon and I found a system for a very reasonable price compared to, you know, the tens of thousands of dollars you spend on those rooftop systems.
Plug-in solar?
Now, here's the thing, folks. I don't want you to run out and buy these plug-in systems right away. Even though they're available on Amazon, you got to make certain that they're allowed in the state where you reside. You're thinking, oh, gosh, darn it, Leah. I knew there had to be a catch. So here's how it works. Most of you think about an outlet as a one-way street, right? Electricity comes from the power company, travels to your house, goes to the outlet, and it powers your toaster or television, your hair dryer.
Hey, Tony Bird 84, how you doing?
Plug-in solar basically says, what if we send a little electricity the other way? The solar panel makes electricity. That electricity passes through a small device called an inverter. All that inverter does is change the electricity coming from the solar panel into the kind of electricity your house can actually use. So it's a bit of a game changer, isn't it? Because instead of paying the utility company all of your electricity needs, well, now you're making some of it yourself and lowering your bill. And if you're a renter or you live in an apartment, this is really a game changer because in the past, well, solar power has been limited to homeowners with roofs and big budgets. And now all you need is a sunny balcony, a couple plug-in panels, and you're reducing your electric bill. So I think I know what you're thinking. Leah, how much can I save? What are the savings with these plug-in solar units? Well, here's the thing. They're, for the most part, pretty small in comparison to rooftop solar power. So the savings can be modest. Now, that Amazon system that I showed you earlier, it states 20 to 40%. Now, here's the thing, though, folks. This is what I know about technology. Technology is always changing. It's advancing. It's evolving. And so I suspect that those savings, they're going to go up. I want you to think about cell phones here for a minute. When cell phones first came out, they were these big, large, bulky things. Nobody owned them except people that had lots and lots of money. And now, well, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone that didn't have a cell phone. And they're no longer those big, expensive, bulky things. And I suspect that plug-in solar is going to take the same route. It's going to change as time goes on. And you're going to be hard-pressed to find a home that doesn't have a plug-in unit. Now, maybe you're thinking, I got another question, Leah. You mentioned earlier in the video to check and see whether or not I can use it in the state or area I reside. And that probably tells you that it's not available everywhere. You can't use it everywhere. And that's the case. There's just a very small amount of states and areas in this country where you can use plug-in solar power. And so here's the reason why. It has to do with safety and regulations. And it's taken the United States a little while to catch up with the technology and make some changes. So here's the thing. Why? It has to do with safety and regulations. And it's taken the United States a little while to catch up with the technology and make some changes. So here's the thing. If you're a utility company, you have to be concerned about your workers. And if power goes out, if there's a terrible storm or hurricane, and you want to send workers to work on lines, you're assuming that those lines are not energized. And you don't want to put your workers at risk, especially if somebody has plug-in solar power and it energizes the line. But there are other safety questions as well. You overload the wiring. The circuit breakers still protect the circuit properly. What about JCIs? These are the kinds of questions that safety organizations here in the United States are working through right now. So that's why it's just taken a while for regulations and rules and utility companies to catch up with technology and the things that are available to consumers today to bring down those energy bills. Now I gotta say this, if you found this video helpful, I want you to check out the CJ Drill Homeowner Survival Guide. You know, it's a book that you can read, you can watch, or do both because there are QR codes with videos walk you through all the repairs that appear in this book. You know, it's kind of like I'm right there with you, telling you, do this. No, don't do that. And chapter 9 of the CJ Drill Homeowner Survival Guide talks about electricity, kind of like what we were talking about today. Shows you how to put in switches, outlets, fixtures. So you want to check it out. I'll place a link in the description below. Leah saying, you can do this. See you next time.
A lack of precipitation Isolation has been the story for many parts of BC so far in the month of August. 0 measurable millimeters of rain in the town of Kamloops through August 20th. Only 0.3 millimeters in Victoria and Kamloops 0 on a 50-day dry streak dating back to July 2nd was your last measurable rain. But let's hope we change that record or break that record. Coming throughout the weekend, we've got some measurable rain accumulating for much of southern and central BC from the Kootenays all the way through to the coastline. But unfortunately, it is also accompanied with a storm risk. We've got a couple areas of severe possible. The first being Sunshine Coast, including the island, and as well throughout the Okanagan. So we've got a couple areas to keep close eye on. The first being mid-afternoon throughout the Okanagan, Vernon, Kelowna, Kamloops. We've got the likelihood of strong storms, but also we're rolling through Nelson, Cranbrook, and into Invermere as these storms approach the Rockies. Those steady showers are going to continue throughout the overnight, becoming a bit more widespread as we head through Sunday. Unfortunately, there is a lot of lightning packed in with the system rolling through, so the unfortunate timing of dry lightning and as well the heat continuing to build on Saturday will be drastically cooler on Sunday.
Oh.
And distractions, your brain has a neurochemical focus switch. And when it's on, your work flows and distractions just go away. And you probably have that switch turned off, and there's no way you would realize it. And if that's the case, no matter what productivity tricks you try, you just can't stay focused long enough to actually accomplish your goals. I spent more than 2 decades working on cognitive function and longevity and consciousness, and I learned how to turn that switch on within just about 20 minutes. And in studies of my brain, I have one of the most resilient brains ever studied. More than 50% better than what's considered the best percentile. But first, you need to know what that switch actually is so you can have a resilient, focusing brain. And focus doesn't have anything to do with your motivation. You can be highly motivated and unfocused at the same time. Focus is a chemical state and a neurological state. Your brain can only enter that state when 2 very specific chemicals are at the right levels at the same time. And when they're there, the switch turns on. When they aren't, it doesn't matter if you try hard, the switch is off. It's like wanting the lights to turn on but not hitting the light switch. And the reason most of us don't turn it on is because modern life has 3 habits that drain those chemicals faster than your brain can make them. And most of those habits feel normal. They feel like life. And the first habit is something most people experience every single day. In fact, many of us feel within minutes of waking up. And then you bring it into work, bring it back home at night, and you go to bed, still running in the background. The problem is your brain looks at this as a signal that something is wrong. And if the signal stays on for too long, your ability to focus just declines. And the habit is chronic stress. When you feel stressed, your adrenal glands release a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is a stress signal, but it's a useful stress signal. It mobilizes energy and it shuts down something your body considers to be non-essential. It helps you survive. And the moment that alarm fires, your brain makes a very specific decision. It pulls resources away from the part of your brain responsible for deep thinking, and it puts everything towards survival and action. So your brain reroutes those 2 focus skills. And this makes a lot of sense for your ancestors. If a lion's chasing you, deep thinking is a liability. Imagine saying, oh look, I do believe that's a lion while it's tackling you. You don't want to do that. You need to run. So the brain shuts the thinking part down and it powers survival. The problem is your brain runs the same exact program when your boss sends you an email. It can't tell the difference between a lion and a difficult conversation. So cortisol comes in either way, and your switch goes dark either way, and it's harder to focus. And so for your ancestors, the stress lasted minutes. The threat passed. Cortisol dropped afterwards, and the thinking brain came back online. But for most of us today, the stress doesn't stop. The deadlines are stacking. The emails keep coming. The ads are tracking you on social, and politicians are probably doing something bad. Cortisol stays elevated all day. Your switch never gets the clear signal it needs to fire. And that's why you can sit down to do important work that you care about, but your brain just won't cooperate. By the way, I've written 9 major books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers. This is where writer's block comes from, too. The reason I could write 9 is I mastered the switch. And the problem is that your brain's own chemistry will tell it that right now is not a safe time to think deeply or to do the work. And the second habit happens while you're unconscious, which makes it the hardest focus killer to notice is while you're asleep. It's something millions of people deal with every night. Because it's so common just about none of us see it as a threat, except your brain does. To your brain, it's a warning signal, keeps your body on alert, and it makes deep focus really hard. And that habit is bad sleep. Sleep is when your brain restores the chemicals that your focus switch requires. And if you don't get enough sleep, or your sleep is just bad quality sleep, you wake up and both of your tanks are running low. So a switch that starts the day depleted can never turn on all the way. And the frustrating part is you don't have to be severely sleep deprived for it to happen. Losing even 60 to 90 minutes consistently can degrade the chemistry that you need to focus. So you sit down to work, you have all the right motivation, you're a good person, and you still feel anxious before your day has even started. It's not a conscious decision you made. It's a hardware problem. Bad sleep also raises cortisol. So when your sleep is bad, you're getting hit from both sides at once. It's depleting the chemicals you need, and you get an alarm that won't shut off. And sleep is only half the equation. And you think the third habit is harmless, so you'd never question it. And this one almost nobody connects to focus. But it might be the most common switch killer of all. In fact, modern life is designed around it. You do it when you're working. You do it when you're watching TV. And most of us spend the majority of our waking hours in that position. And that habit is sitting all day long. Physical movement is one of the primary triggers for making the chemicals that your switch runs on. When you move, your brain gets a direct signal to make more of these chemicals. And when you sit still for hours, the signal never fires. So the chemicals just slowly deplete. And your switch dims. That's why you can feel sharp in the morning and you get foggy as the day goes on. And it doesn't seem to make any sense. It's your brain just running out of the chemistry it needs to keep your focus switch turned on. You don't need a full workout to fix this. Even 5 minutes of brisk walking before a focus session is enough to trigger a meaningful response. You just need to move before you sit down to think. So that's what's working against you. Chronic stress just burns through the chemicals that you need for your switch to work. And poor sleep prevents your brain from restoring these chemicals when you're asleep at night. And then you have a sedentary day, you sit around, and you're starving your brain of the movement that it needs to help you focus. So all three of these behaviors are attacking the same two chemicals that you need for your brain to work the way you want. And most of us are dealing with all three of these things at once without even knowing about the chemicals. I certainly did. And that brings us to the most important question. What is the focus switch, and what are the chemicals, and what do you do about it? So right behind your forehead, there's a part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC. It's the CEO of your brain, the part that keeps you locked on the task in front of you. And it runs on two specific chemicals that have to be present at the right levels at the right time. And if you have ADHD or ADD, you have a problem with these chemicals because that's a condition that affects the prefrontal cortex. But when those chemicals are balanced, the prefrontal cortex lights up, and you can enter a state of locked-in focus. And if those chemicals are not balanced or just not present, it doesn't matter how hard you try, how hard you push. The CEO of your brain goes on vacation, and no amount of discipline or flogging yourself or pushing harder or grinding is going to bring it back. It is not about effort. The chemical balance right there is your focus switch. And the first chemical is one a lot of us haven't heard of. It's called norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is like a spotlight inside your brain. When you have the right amount of norepinephrine, the spotlight locks onto what you're working on, and everything else just kind of fades away. The room noise disappears, stops pulling at you, and you're locked in. The second chemical is one you probably heard of, called dopamine. And you might have heard of it as the pleasure chemical, but that's not really right. Dopamine is actually the desire chemical, the wanting chemical. It's a signal your brain sends when it decides something is worth focus. So dopamine motivates you to pursue a goal. And if you're out of dopamine, you don't have the desire, you don't have the wanting, and then you don't have the energy. But when dopamine is working properly, your brain looks at the task in front of you and says, oh, this matters, let's focus. But if you're slow, your brain looks at the same task and it feels zero pull. Those two chemicals work together, norepinephrine and dopamine. Norepinephrine without dopamine gives you alertness, but you're scattered, you're awake and wired, but you don't care about anything specific. You're like a spotlight with nobody deciding where to point it, so it's just wobbling around. Dopamine without norepinephrine gives you that desire, but you have no clarity. You want to work, but your brain just drifts all over the place. You care about the goal, but you can't stay on the task. Does one of those sound familiar? Well, the bad news is you can switch from one of those dysfunctional modes to the other. But when those two chemicals are in the right balance, your focus switch turns on. And that state isn't so rare. It's not reserved for geniuses or people with perfect genetics or monks who meditated for years. It's a normal neurological state that your brain is supposed to go into regularly. Your ancestors accessed it every single day because their survival depended on being able to lock in and focus on tasks like hunting or even gathering. But how do you get norepinephrine and dopamine back to the levels your prefrontal cortex needs? Well, how do you do that when modern life is constantly working against both of them? Luckily, you don't need a strict morning routine. You don't need to spend $2 million a year on measuring things. You don't even need an expensive magic supplement to restore the balance. All you need is a set of common targeted compounds that work on the level of this chemical imbalance. The first compound is called L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine is an amino acid that's a building block of protein that your brain uses to make dopamine first and then norepinephrine. Tyrosine also turns into something you may have heard of called L-dopa, which converts to dopamine and then norepinephrine. And that whole pathway controls how much of those focus-related chemicals your body can make. So when you take L-tyrosine, you're basically giving your brain the raw ingredients it needs to make the chemicals to activate the switch. And the dose is usually 500 milligrams. That works for almost everyone, but some people need up to 2 grams, and ideally you take it 30 minutes, maybe an hour before you want to be really focused. Well, for me, I just take 500 milligrams every single morning. And don't start high because it's this thing very powerful. Just start with 500 milligrams and see how your body responds and work up if you need to. It works best and fastest on an empty stomach, but it does work with food. And the second compound actually involves 2 compounds that work together. You already know caffeine. You probably use it every day, but you're almost certainly not using it in the way that produces the best focus effect. The way caffeine works is by blocking a chemical called adenosine, which is a sleepiness signal that builds up throughout the day and tells your brain it's time to rest. So if you block adenosine, your brain stays alert, and that increases norepinephrine and dopamine signaling, and the prefrontal cortex gets more of the fuel that you need to go into focus mode. So you can make your caffeine do this even better by adding L-theanine. L-theanine is an amino acid that's naturally found in green tea, but you can't drink enough green tea to get L-theanine at meaningful levels. L-theanine L-theanine promotes alpha brainwaves, which are the relaxed, alert mental state that you get with some forms of meditation or focus. And L-theanine takes the cortisol and anxiety edge down, and it enhances caffeine's effects. And the combination results in a mental state where you sit down to work, and 2 hours later you look up and you wonder where the time went, but you did a lot of work. L-theanine plus caffeine together outperform caffeine alone on every measure of cognitive performance, like working memory and accuracy. But caffeine does help on working memory and accuracy even without L-theanine, so you might as well do both of those. Most people drink coffee and don't take L-theanine, or they take equal amounts of both. The optimal ratio is 1 part of caffeine to 2 parts of L-theanine. That means if you have about 100 milligrams of caffeine, which is a typical cup of coffee, then you want 200 milligrams or a little more of L-theanine. That's the magic ratio to turn on your focus switch. And I say this as a coffee entrepreneur who has started 2 major coffee companies, and Danger Coffee is my coffee company. This is caffeine on my bicep. Caffeine got me through business school, through my undergrad, and it's been a major part of my longevity journey because it turns out coffee is good for you. And another compound that can massively turn on the focus switch is modafinil. Modafinil is a prescription wakefulness pharmaceutical that was originally developed for narcolepsy, people who fall asleep uncontrollably. Narcolepsy is really unpleasant, but it turns out the things that stop narcolepsy help healthier brains lock in and focus. Modafinil works by increasing norepinephrine and dopamine signaling directly in the prefrontal cortex, which is where you want it, so you can lock it. I've been using a low dose of modafinil almost every single day for 25 years. I have 8 companies, 9 creative selling books, 1,400 podcast episodes, 2 teenagers, and a life that I love. I was not equipped to do this until I understood the power of the switch in my brain. And modafinil, it's both of those primary focus chemicals at the same time. It sustains them for 8 to 12 hours. And that's why I took 100 milligrams this morning, along with my L-theanine and my Danger Coffee. I do this every day because I like my life and I like to be able to just lock in. And the result is a quality focus that most people have never experienced from any other compound. And I've quantified it using computer science and electricity coming off my brain. My brain does not fatigue like a normal brain because I hacked it. Modafinil is a prescription medication in the US and most Western countries, but you can still order it online. And if you can't access modafinil, or you'd rather not use a pharmaceutical, there's an herb that has somewhat similar effects, but not nearly as strong. It's called Rhodiola rosea. Rhodiola is an adaptogenic herb that helps norepinephrine at the right levels in your prefrontal cortex for longer. It also helps you to reduce cortisol and improves mental performance under stress. Do you think I'm also taking Rhodiola? Yeah, I am. So for the most powerful results, you can combine Rhodiola with L-tyrosine and Danger Coffee and L-theanine. And with that combination, it's like the best day you've had in years. But knowing what turns that switch on, it's really just half the problem. The other half is doing the right order at the right time. And this is where a 20-minute activation protocol comes in. And the protocol starts with your morning routine. So before you check your phone, go outside, take off your glasses, and get some bright light. Do it within 30 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes helps. And if you really want to do it wrong, you could bring your phone with you and talk to someone. You just need the light in your eyes. You don't have to meditate, but it's better if you do. Even 2 minutes will help. You're not trying to get a 10. The goal is to just send your brain's master timer a signal that it needs to set your norepinephrine and cortisol curve correctly for the entire day. See that bright light in the morning? Tells the focus chemicals in your brain that they should turn on. So you can do all these things right, but if you're lacking light, you get a blunted effect. And if it's raining or dark outside, just open your blinds all the way, sit near the brightest one you have. It's better to not have a window that blocks some light that you need, but do your best. And if nothing else, the brightest incandescent bulb you can find will be helpful. And you can also, during that time, do some light movement. It doesn't have to be a workout. You can go for a walk outside for 5 minutes in the sun and get this done. And if you don't want to go outside, 5 minutes of walking up and down stairs, it's enough. Do some squats, just air squats. It doesn't need very much. You just need to get a neurochemical response by telling your body, move. And then you take your stack about 20 or 30 minutes before you're going to start your focus of the day. And the exact combination depends on what you have access to and what your body likes. The core stack that works for me is 500 milligrams to 1 gram of L-tyrosine and 100 milligrams of caffeine with 200 milligrams of L-theanine. That means I do a double espresso Danger Coffee. I make it into an Americano. I add some butter and MCT oil. That's a different video. I take my L-tyrosine, I take my L-theanine, and then I can record a video like this because my brain just works. And that 20 to 30 minute window is the window that these compounds need to cross your blood-brain barrier and reach the levels in your PFC so you can produce the focus state on demand. And now you start your day. What this feels like is like you've reduced friction. There's a sense of ease. I built my first millions and my career in Silicon Valley by pushing and grinding and burning and overcoming.
He's a millionaire?
It's dialed in.
Wow.
It's effortless. The sense of effortlessness that makes your day more joyful, even if the work wasn't the,
So
like, the best task
fancy.
you could have done. But something that was kind of okay becomes no problem. And that effortlessness is what makes you not yell at your kids when you come home at the end of the day. It's what gives you energy to just take care of yourself. And that focus state without effort will fully arrive before the 20 minutes are up and your work will start to flow like it's supposed to. I did spend 25 years and over $2 million learning what I just told you. I've run a neuroscience company for 10 years and I've taught millions of people how to live longer and improve their brains. And the most humbling part of all of it is that the focus was never the problem for me, even though I thought it was. I thought I was lazy or undisciplined, but I wasn't. I was trying to run a Ferrari with the wrong fuel, and you're probably doing the same thing. Now that you know what the right fuel is, you can activate your focus state again. It's going to take you 20 minutes. And again, to just summarize for you, you're dealing with caffeine from Danger Coffee. You're looking at L-theanine, L-tyrosine, sunlight, and a brief walk. That's all it takes.
Well, I am downloading this information. That is very good information. And I think I
For
shall...
word and the story that they grew up with actually seemingly contradicts other versions of the story. It can feel like just like a house of cards collapsing on the floor before your very eyes. Because while I grew up with this seemingly perfectly polished story of the first vision, there are actually 9 different accounts of the story. Of these 9 accounts, 4 of those accounts were written by Joseph Smith, and 5 of those accounts were written by people who had heard Joseph Smith describe it. In my opinion, these 9 different versions do contradict each other pretty significantly. These are like inconsistencies that I think as you're reading with the perspective of growing up with this specific story, it's kind of hard to look away from the inconsistencies. In this video, I am going to read through some of the different versions to show in the actual text like where the contradictions are. I'll also link all 9 versions below so that if you want to go do your own research, you can read the primary sources and look for yourself. To give one quick example of these contradictions here at the front of the video, one of the most major discrepancies is that in the different versions of the story, it seems that in one version, Joseph Smith refers
Okie dokie, well, yeah. I guess I can set up right now. I forget. Oh yeah, I was trying to show the bowl better, so I went down a bit more. Okay, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Especially thank you for commenting because it gives me something to work with. And I'll do a sleep stream tonight probably. And probably have a little snack. Those avocados are right. I'll eat those today. So, I'll see your comments in the next stream. Thank you for joining.